Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, and socially inappropriates, my name is Tom Fury, and this is Zero News. So by now it's no news to you that Rupert Lowe has broken the Conservative Party's membership, which is, by any stretch, it's a massive achievement. I don't think it's been done before. So it's crazy, and at the same time, as getting reform candidates to defect, which is important because reform, as opposed to ex-conservatives, ex-government people. This is really important because this is one thing that Farage did to his party that made it, other than the centrist politics, that made it unwelcoming for people because they'd already voted for these people and hated them so well they want to vote for him again. So you've got in Rupert Lowe a party that is trying to avoid using those already disgraced scumbags, which is great. Farage, on the other hand, welcomes them in. So the people have spoken, whether any of us activists agree or anything else, and things could change in a year's time. Politics is a very fickle place, and everything that everybody says today may be the opposite of what they're saying in 6 months' time or a year's time. That's always worth bearing in mind because it's happened many, many, many times. So thinking about the next election with any absolute certainty, I think, is crazy. But with that said, at the moment, the people have spoken. The gravitation is, as I said to you, he's got a massive gravitational pull, but it's going to more than that now. He's getting the belief of people who are desperate, and not in the way that I don't mean that could come off wrong and people will jump on that. But what I mean is desperate to save their country, and they're now beginning. I think a lot of people beginning to throw left and right out the window. Not many people, but they're beginning to throw left and right out the window in favour of survival. In some cases, especially on the right. I think this, as much as we're proudly right wing or whatever else, I think so many of us are realizing that, oh shit, this is a war about right and wrong, and so it's great to see that whatever any of us think, whether we're supportive or not supportive of Rupert Lowe, it's great to see so many people from not only the movement but from the mainstream beginning to gravitate around this man, in spite of the attacks. Now, I was saying to you the other day, there's a couple of things I want to cover, and I want to cover the big danger in a little while. But before we get there, and I don't want to do a big piece on Ben Habib again. We've covered it, but he's still doubling down. He's still calling them, FNAP party and other things, right? And I asked you the other day, why? Well, I've been doing some research on things like this, and it's a well-known thing in activist circles, especially on the left. Interesting, especially on the left, and it's a well-known thing that if you weaponize language like this, and when you say Nazi, bigot, all these other things, racist, because most of us are actually quite abhorrent to feel racism is actually abhorrent because actual racism is right. So what happens is we have a visceral disgust to it, all of us, except for the left. Um, Ironically enough. But we have a visceral response to it, and so it appeals to parts of our brain that are more primal, more protective, more self-protective. It's like don't want to be associated with certain words, which is why you see certain influences reacting badly to one word as opposed to any meaning behind it. The word itself triggers them into a crazy state where they're not being rational, they're acting on some impulsive emotion, like you see the left do when they jump on something because they have already got it all figured out. No more information required. A dangerous place to be. And again, seeing this from other people, but there's a reason why it's done. The motive is that it works. I said it makes it repulsive, right? So if the reason they're trying to do it is because if they control the words and they control the conversation that you're having, and this is what makes me think that they do have ties with the left or something along those lines, or at least the centre left, because if you really look down to why this is done in activism, it's always been done. I didn't really realize this, but it's always been done not just to control the narrative. That doesn't really explain it. They use these words because it creates a visceral response in not only us, who don't want to be called that and might want to be disassociated with it, but they're the general public. So when it's a smear, it's deeper than a smear. It's a psychological thing they're trying to do to everybody to make them feel a disgust, even if it's on a subconscious level. It controls the narrative. Not only does it keep you talking about the thing they want to keep you talking about, but people just keep hearing these words over and over again. And yes, we do get desensitized, but part of our brain doesn't. Part of it responds to it, and that's why they do it. That's why it was originally introduced as these words, these insults were introduced as conversation stoppers. And while they're not conversation stoppers anymore, they still affect people's brains, which is why we've got to really fight against it and move away from these silly race arguments, because it's what they want. And now you know it's what they want, in my opinion, then steer away. So again, Rupert Lowe has become emergent, and he's definitely at the moment the clear leader. And like I say, things can change in politics, but he's breaking records already. And what did we say that we needed from someone who's going to actually be able to do this? They need to be able to break. What was I saying just the other day? They need to break a lot of records in order to be able to pull this off. At the moment, trajectory reached or matched, should I say. So the trajectory needed to get there currently is scaling upwards at the exact correct, I say exact, at the correct rate. The party's growing at the correct rate. The gravitational pull is not just for people in this movement, that part of politics, that part of politics. It's a fully gravitational movement which British people feel aligned with, in spite of the constant attempts to pull them down using these other words. So again, earlier on, the reason being, I feel like I've not addressed something, but the reason being is because it can stick and often does, and even if you don't brand that person that, it'll stick, and we've got bigger problems, and I can see them incoming, and this is why I think we really do need to pull off this next election, because I'm not hopeful about what happens afterwards. We've already got an uphill battle. We've talked about this. But I've been doing some research on the left in the last few days, and how much the far left seems to have dripped into the left, and how many people as a result are, again, on the centre left, are so much harder left than they even realise that they are. And that they don't realise that's why they're getting triggered, having visceral responses to things, being so defensive, being so above criticism. All of these things are not really natural for us. And in watching the left, I'm seeing people that were probably centre right, who are disillusioned with people like Jordan Peterson, others who they felt were perhaps centre right, or in their view, and other people they've become disillusioned with. And so they're not wholeheartedly embracing communism, but it makes them the most dangerous kind of people, because they are the onion. They're the non-extreme part. So the non-extreme part of the left before used to be just about basic working stuff. And my belief is that there's so much of a distance passed now since the war. So many people are ignorant to it, or so many people have changed the narrative of it, or so many people are distrusting of governments and that because of the things that they've done. There's too much time passed between the two now. So what I'm seeing is an increasing number of channels with a lot of subscribers who are making almost valid points. I say almost valid because they're ignoring big issues. They're talking about socialism, but they're not saying the words. Well, very rarely are they. But either they don't know, or they are admitting the fact that socialism is a conveyor belt to communism. But that's not what these people are fighting for. And socialism has always appealed to the working class, because especially as it often wasn't called socialism, or it wasn't perceived the same way. So it was really about, why people used to vote for the Labour Party, because they believed the Labour Party was on the side of Labour, of the people who act, the working class, of people who work for the country. That was the whole idea. So why so many people in Scotland and other places voted for them for so many years? Because they believed that they were for the working people. That was the common belief amongst some people, whilst other people had a bit more of a savvy to what they were about. Many common voters would vote for Labour for that reason. They were the common people, and they believed that Labour Party was the closest they had to representation. The Labour Party is now not far left enough for people, and that's even more moderate people. Starmer, with all his crazy laws and everything else, isn't far enough left for these people. Um, and what surprised me the other day is some of the quite coherent, really good arguments that were being made by quite funny, intelligent people. So these weren't the normal lame left people that we've had to deal with. These are really intelligent, articulate, sometimes funny people who are doing quite good content. And it's either been done in a world of naivety or it's done with deliberate omittance. With some of them, but with other ones, it's really hard to tell. And if it's hard for me to tell, as someone on the right, how's that going to be for the average person who hasn't made up their mind or doesn't know? And what it does is it rips capitalism and democracy apart in a very, very truthful way. But and then it sort of suggests that the socialist parts of things that were working were then demonized, which is true in some cases, and destroyed and whatever else, although the left was behind destroying a lot of things. But often, socialist countries would justify their existence by their health service and stuff like that. Communist countries do the same thing. So there's a growing movement of people that are more towards the centre left, more towards the average person is what I'm trying to get at. That are now spewing more and more what we would call far left rhetoric, in as much as they will. So this one of the particular people I was looking at sort of condemned communism as one of the crazy ideologies of the 20th century, along with fascism, like we talked about, and then immediately went on to make a whole video about how bad capitalism was, which was really an advert for socialism because it was brought up just a few times in about how the socialism part was destroyed, and that's where everything went to shit. And there's some truths in there, which what makes it doubly dangerous. But it all ignores the fact that socialism, a conveyor belt to communism, it completely ignores that. Again, either out of naivety or out of omission. And it ignores the fact that, so they talk as though socialism has never been tried. It's already being tried. There are socialist countries out there now. They talk as though communism's not involved, and it's absolutely a part of the chain. It's the aim of socialism is to become communism. Communism is the utopia to these people. And whether they do or don't know it, the message they're sending out is quite dangerous because it's that same old message, but packaged in a much more high IQ package that hundreds of thousands, if not millions in some of the channels, are beginning to listen to. And that is that, hey, look, all this is about, again, because they're not including communism, all this is about is trying to give people a fairer share of the wealth. All this is about is fairness for people. Look at this system of capitalism, which has become corrupt and needs fixing. Because, and it never works. Democracy never works. Democracy does fail after a certain amount of time. That's just fact. And that's why it needs to keep being fought for. Because it is prone to failures. But what never gets acknowledged is it's the best form we've found so far. What communists and socialists will argue is, we've never tried real communism. Yeah, we have. And that was the point. Real communism only ever worked on paper. The moment it was ever tried to put into real life, people die. And that's just a fact. That's why a lot of these people are now, they won't demonize communism, but they'll say it's, one of those bad ideologies from the 20th century. Meaning, I'm one of the reasonable people. But then make a video that subtly but convincingly tells you that socialism is only this, and it's just for this, and these are all the mistakes that say Maggie Thatcher made, which we know she made plenty, but it doesn't point to Europe or anything like that. It points at things to do with socialism and stuff like that. Actually blames a lot of libertarianism for it as well, interestingly. But I realise it's getting long, and I'm trying to fit a lot of information in, so I'm skipping bits, and I realise that. So maybe a longer video another time when I can give you more details and information. But the point I'm trying to get to is the Green Party is not a joke. And whatever, if we're going to back Rupert Lowe, we need to get him out. If we really believe that, that's who we're going to go with, right? That's what that's what the public is saying. That we need to back him. We need to not only back him, spread the word. Need to keep spreading the word. He needs to be a household name in a year. He needs to be really, really knocking on people's consciousnesses massively, because I believe this might be one of the very last, if not the last, election we've got to change things. And not just because of the growing demographics in the country, not just because of the growing numbers of people that are prepared to go to civil war or similar in the country, but simply because not only we got these other people that hate us in the country, but the left, the far left that have now infiltrated the left and the centre left, that used to only have big mouths because they had the media, because they had the colleges, because they had all these places. The loudest voices actually had the fewest members. That's changing. I'm seeing a change in the demographic in the country. There are more and more people in the mainstream that are now buying in. When I say mainstream public, who are buying into this narrative more and more. I live next door to one, and he's a good guy. But my point of it being is more and more people are being pulled into this average, normal people, because it's being presented now in an average, normal way. Same way Patriot Alternative tried to put themselves over in a passive, hey, we're cool, we're not like that kind of way. Same sort of thing, except these people actually believe it. And I think some of them do anyway. And so I think there's going to be a massive turnout from the left at the next election, regardless of who they back. And I think if we don't match that massive turnout, regardless of who people are voting for, we will lose. Um, I don't think we realise how many people are prepared to turn out on the left. They're organised and they're ready, and they are pulling people in. Numbers are growing. They're not fringe anymore. And if we don't change the culture narrative of this country, the culture wars, if we don't change the politics of this country so that it starts to get rid of some of this stuff, we're gonna lose the battle, because the people that are coming up, more and more of these actually intelligent people, are making this argument again, and it all comes back down to communism's good on paper, yeah, and it should stay there. But more distance, in my opinion, from the world wars we get, and from that period we get, the more people like to romanticize this stuff. Because they look at the system we got now, it's not perfect, it's become corrupt, it needs fixing, and so their answer is this: just socialism's great. But it's never worked out really very well for many countries. A lot of countries that have socialism will obviously say it's great. That's their job as governments, but often doesn't work out that way. There are exceptions, but how much of an exception you could call them is debatable. Debatable, but you will get people in those countries that will argue a massive debate for it. They will fight for it. So yeah, so my genuine belief is if we're gonna back Rupert, then we need to do it full force in terms of getting his name out there everywhere, because it's going to take more than just support. It's going to take a massive amount of people getting up and going out and voting. And again, I'm not going to try and predict next election. So much can happen in politics, but it's going to take everybody who gives a shit to get up and vote, because there's going to be a lot more people on the left voting, I think, than people realise. They're not disillusioned with politics on the left. They're not going, oh shit, because they're not happy with Keir Starmer, but they're not saying, oh, we're going to give up. They are fully prepared to embrace the Green Party, and anybody that's prepared to embrace those politics. We're still in a hell of a lot of danger. And I honestly believe, like I say, we need to win, because there may come a point where the socialists outweigh the vote, especially with the other demographics that are going to vote against us as well. It may be enough to tip the balance in this country forever. And that won't be immigrant votes, that will be votes from white English people. That is the danger at the moment. I say white English people because I name their skin color purely because they are racist against other white people. That's why I mention it. the only reason why I mention it. So I'll leave you with those thoughts. Sorry, it's a bit longer than I intended, but I'll catch you soon. I'm Tom Fury. This is Zero News. Calling it a day for now.